I'm very excited today about my guest, Don Miller. Don Miller and I have been friends for the past few years. I actually met Don while he was giving a talk at one of the homeschool conventions on creation science. It's a beautiful talk. He's well spoken. He's got a brilliant mind. I love having him on the show today. I think you're going to love what he has to say as well. Learn a lot from him. Creation science has always been a big deal in my life. I've given my own talks on everything from the shrinkage of the sun, magnetic field of the earth, erosion of waters, aquatic sea creatures with sonar capabilities, laws of thermodynamics, order to disorder, all that stuff. There's something about creation science, about the intelligent design of God. Of course, the Bible says in Romans 1 and 20 says that creation itself testifies of God's existence, leaving mankind without an excuse. Because when I'm looking at the stars, even here in Tennessee, when I'm at the ocean, wherever I'm at, that there's this sense of awe, Grand Canyons. I'm like, there's a God, there's something that's bigger than me. I'm a small thing here. And by these things I see, I know that there is an invisible God that I don't see. It testifies of that. And I believe that even creation, especially Genesis, is telling us one major thing for everyone to hear. If you're listening, you're not on the best plan of your life. The plan that God had for you, which I believe is a peaceful one to prosper you. He has a good plan that He wrote while He was forming you in your mother's belly. You're not accidentally made. You're made on purpose. That's what Genesis says. You didn't come accidentally. He didn't make an accidental mess. He didn't design you incorrectly. Well, what about the plans? If those plans have been hijacked by somebody else or by you, today start looking towards that Creator. Find Him. In fact, it was Psalms 139 that says, "We're fearfully and wonderfully made," that caused Don to come back to Christ. It was actually the study of the human brain. He's gone on to study several other things he's going to talk about today, from bats to a plethora of other things. But the big deal is that God gave him this new model, a model of teaching, everything from history, science, first to history, the three R's, everything, and unlocking the mystery of the human brain. If I were to drop a bunch of names that have paid him good money to be able to work with them in the science community, the technology community, you'd be really surprised, but even more so that he stepped away from that life, and he's doing it solely for homeschoolers and parents like you and I, how to take these wonderful principles and this beautiful brain that God designed and use it to help them in their cognitive responses and their memory, everything, and their understanding of all these different subjects. That's why I'm so excited about him being here. I mean, he's been on TED Talks. He's spoke, that's the big stage. He spoke around the United States. But today, he's on our show, Jett Connect.
One of the things that I was checking out before the conference was I went, well, what's the current status as far as how many calculations, how many transitions your brain goes through a second? And I didn't, because it always changes. It always changes. So I checked out how many synapses, those are the gaps between your neurons, and it's gone up to 160 trillion. And before it was 50 trillion. So I went, wow, it's jumped up quite a bit. And they've got a lot of new imaging that's changed that. So it's gone up 100 trillion connections inside of her brain. So I was just going, well, how many calculations, or, how many, I don't know what the word is, how many transmissions does your brain go through a second? And it turns out it's an exaflop. And so I started jumbling around the numbers, and it's an exaflop is 1 million trillion calculations per second. So I love to put it into terms that people can understand. And so if you're counting one by one, it would take you 50 billion years to count the calculations your brain does in 1 second. And that's just a fact.
Wow.
That's just a fact.
We are fearfully and wonderfully made by the Lord.
And I was telling the guys, I said there's things about science that just I got saved, and I was a very analytical type person, very math oriented, and at 16, almost 17, when I became a Christian, and I started attending UCSD, which is, I was in the higher ranking college of their colleges, and I was in the pre-med biology program. And as a brand new Christian, as I was hearing what what I was hearing, I realized I was studying a technology of another realm, and everything became a holy time of worship for me when I was young, when I was just 18, 19. And it kept growing and growing. And like I began to realize when Jesus said something like, the hairs on your head are numbered, he was exaggerating, but in a funny way. He was saying it's true, the hairs on your head are numbered, but it would have been more accurate for a scientist to say the atoms of every hair are known by God, because that's actually what's going on. And there's this one story of a young woman I knew, and she was raised by a wonderful mom, and she went into literature and different things with English, and there's a lot of real snares there, and she eventually turned her heart away from the Lord, and she wrote a book about, I don't know what it's called, maybe Almost Deceived or something like that. And she said, I used to think God was behind every bush and behind every tree, and that God knew everything about me. And it was funny because she went one direction, I went the opposite. I studied reality. I didn't study man's ideas. I studied actually what is there, how do atoms work and what's going on and how do biological systems work. And I said, no, you don't understand. It's way more than that. It's the in him we live and move and have our being. He is aware of absolutely everything, and he never forgets anything. It's an infinite mind, and he knows every intent of the thoughts. And it's not a problem of God remembering anything. He can instantly replay anyone's life to the milliseconds. Everything is known. And it was just, it's become, and I was telling the guys, I said, it's so cool for me when I learn something that just shakes me to the core. And I call them like my Thomas moments. I say it's where Thomas felt, the wounds of Jesus, and he fell on his knees and he said, my Lord, my God. And it's like I'll learn things and I just go, oh my gosh, I didn't know it could go to this level. But when you actually see, there's this one picture of, what's his name, Jett Lichtman of Harvard, and he does this neural mapping, and he's the most advanced person in the world. And it took them 5 years. They take these incredibly thin slices of a mouse's brain, and then they would scan it with lasers and feed it through a supercomputer. And they finally came up with this three-dimensional image of what a mouse's brain actually looks like. And when you look at it, it's well, to give an example, when I was 18, I was on my own and I was going to make some spaghetti, and I didn't like to cook, so I was going to make a lot of spaghetti. So I had my one pan in my apartment that had no furniture, and I put 5 pounds of spaghetti into this much water, and I thought I'm going to make a lot of spaghetti, and I came back and it was like solid. It was solid spaghetti. It was the craziest thing, and I went, whoa. And so I went out and got something from Jack in the Box or something, and I came back and it had cooled, and I took it out and it was a solid, it was like a ball, but it was in a pan shape, and I could drop it and it would bounce. And it was solid, completely solid. That's exactly what a brain looks like. That's what the mouse's brain looked like. There's no air spaces, there's nothing. It's this mass of noodles, and it's colorized. You can look it up, Jett Lichtman from Harvard, and you can see this image. And I said, that is the most incredible image ever made. And I'm going, how in the world does that work? Yeah. And then I learned, and then I was watching this podcast with the world's leading brain people. And so Jett Lichtman's going, I want to map the human brain. That's my goal. And so this fellow in a wheelchair, very, very smart, very perceptive, he said, Jeff, how much of the mouse's brain was that took you 5 years to map? And he goes, 3 billions. And the fellow just went, 3 billions? And it looks like that? And then the fellow didn't say it, but it doesn't take anything to make the calculations. That you'd have to have 300 million more of those images in order to make the mouse's brain. And you're looking at it and you're going, holy smokes, just that in itself. Right. But 300 million more images? And the guy goes, and you think, the guy in the wheelchair goes, and you're going to map the human brain? And, wow. and he goes, that's quite a task. And that took you 5 years? Well, that's about 1.5 billion years to do the mouse's brain. And he just kind of collapses. It was funny to see Jett Lichtman, the leading fellow with neural mapping, collapse in his chair, and he goes, yeah. I mean, they're just so crazy. Right. And I'm going, how in the world can that thing work? How can you put 300 million of those things together and it work? And the really astonishing thing is what escapes people's notice is that it's done by the DNA, which is, it's built by the DNA, as well as all the rest of it, and the DNA is smaller than you can see with your eyes. How in the world can something that you can't even see build a computer that does that, or does an exaflop of calculations a second? And I can just say to you, Christmas, 40 years ago. And you can come up with memories. Just tell me a word that tells me a memory.
I remember opening the presents on that particular Christmas Eve.
Okay. How about the Christmas when you had your first child?
Beautiful, sweet.
How about this Christmas?
A lot of fun this Christmas too. Just
you could go on and on, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could describe the rooms. You could describe the
I
pictures.
think we had tamales instead of ham.
I mean, you probably remember what the plates look like and everything. And
the smells, right?
Yeah, but how in the world is that stored inside of this mush inside of our head?
And then creation itself testifies of God's existence, leaving mankind without excuse.
Instantaneous recall.
It's crazy.
But what's happening, what's really wild is what's actually happening is as I'm speaking to you, your ears are actually recording about 10,000 vibrations a second. And they're going, and you've got basically a neural pattern going in that's maybe 15 seconds long. And you've got 150,000 on and offs going in your brain, and your brain is searching not based on the words I'm saying, but by the exact vibrations coming from the ears. Do you see?
Yeah.
So it's a technology that's so much not of this realm.
Yeah.
And what I told the guys was, and I said when I learned these things, it puts me on my face before God, and it's like, and everything shouts, it's okay. It's okay. You can trust me. It says, I will counsel you with my eye upon you, and I will guide you. And that, Psalms 32, verse 8. And it's just like, it's hard to, when I was young, the Lord would speak to me much more directly, and I'd have these strong impressions. It doesn't do that anymore very often. It's more like, what am I supposed to do? And it's like, it's like if I could act out like I'm God going, you've been around the block a few times, you figure it out, And so, because it says that wisdom will guide you to the right and to the left. And so I start thinking about what's best for the family. I start thinking what's best for people. I start praying about things, and some things come from the outside, and there's little signs. But I'm really serious. A lot of times, I want to be like Gideon, going, just make it wet and make it dry.
I heard it years ago. I think that the father eventually wants his children. Like I'll come home from work or something and tell one of my kids, hey, you cleaned your room? And they'll go, we'll go clean your room. And hey, if you clean your room, well, go clean your room. And eventually, what I want to do is I'll come home and find they've already cleaned the room. Yeah. And eventually, maybe that they'll look and become kind of like their father, and that just comes natural. And I think that our Father, as we're getting older, expects us to eventually start having his characteristics. Hey, God, should I help this homeless guy over here? Or should I? That guy doesn't know the Lord. Maybe I should speak. Well, I don't know that I have to ask Harley anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's now part of my character as I've become more like him. I still have a long ways to go. He's higher than me, his ways and everything. But you mentioned this a couple times. So how old were you when these specific things started testifying you, like that scripture I just quoted? Creation itself testifies.
It was when I was 18. Right as a brand new Christian. And what I wanted to tell you was kind of special, because it's like you take these leaps of faith, and it's like, and there's signs that, because there's all kinds of things as a father and as a husband. Is it taking too much time? Is it bringing too much stress? Are the finances there? Is it panning out? I mean, you're checking yourself the whole time. And so what was kind of interesting to me was I went through something like that recently, and it was, I went through two things. I went through a massive, from what we're doing with CrossWired, I realized I have to organize things to a level that I've never done it before. I must have 100,000 files on my computer, and and every word is important in different parts of it. So it's really important that stuff be incredibly organized. And so I went, and so like my computer screen is very, very interesting. And I've had young yakes, those are young adults who know everything. and they come by and go, man, that's the most disorganized screen I've ever seen. And I said, well, actually, I'm using what's called loci, which is a form of memory. And I have things positioned all around so I can go to them instantly. And I have instant drop files, and I have all kinds of things. And it's just because I'm recording so many things over the course of a day, and you don't have to do that, so you don't understand the complexity. I like to put them in their place, of which you're actually looking at. So anyway, so I
It's a little way of having some fun.
yeah, with the yakes, with the the yakes.
What do you call them, yakes? That's funny.
Yakes, yeah. The young adults who know everything, right? So anyway, so I started off doing this thing, and I as I increasingly realized I need to do this thing. So I ended up spending 7 months organizing material. Now that is a little bit frustrating, and so I was bringing it before the Lord, and every time I'd bring it before the Lord, it was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. For us to go to the next tier, I have to do what I'm doing. And then as I did it, the index is 1,200 pages, the index, and it's all immediate. All I have to do is type in a code, and it goes immediately to what I want, tells me where the file is, and I can find vast amounts of information instantaneously, which is what I need, because when I'm dealing with the synapses of the brain, I have to know where my latest research is, and I have to know what I said about it and how I said it. Because when you're dealing with kids, because we deal with kids from kindergarten through high school, you have to know how to say things at all different age levels, and I have to know exactly how I said it before, because I'll get little analogies or little fun little things, or I'll say a little joke, and what's hard. It's much harder than writing a book, because a book you can go through in 3 to 12 hours, say. Well, a curriculum for 1 year is 180 hours of stuff. And if someone's going to come up to you and say, I really enjoyed your curriculum, that's a statement, because that's 180 hours of stuff you put together, and we have 10 years that we're working on. Wow. So that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And so it requires systems that I've never seen anybody using, and so I've had to create my own. So one of the beautiful things was Renita. I'm just amazed at how much my wife is a vessel of God's help to me and direction to me too. And she'll come by and she'll go, you need to do this. And I go, that's impossible. It cannot be done. It absolutely cannot be done. And then she'll come back a little bit later. I still think you need to do that. Yeah. And I don't want to. I want to stay on target for what I want to tell you.
No, it's good that you talk with your wife. I mean, the help makes us better. They're better.
Well, what's funny is that I'll go, okay. I can see now the value of what you're saying. Yeah. I can see the value of what you're saying. So on this particular thing, which was a huge decision for me to make, to do what she was saying, and I penciled it out, and I started checking this and that and everything else. I said, it can be done. It can be done, but it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. But I mapped it, and I checked it again. I mean, when I do a check, it's like 12 hours of stuff that I have to put together, and I have to analyze. That's I'm dealing. And I say it can be done, and that is what led me to having to organize things to a degree I'd never done before for 7 months.
Was her idea of trying to get it more to the people on a basic level that could be repeated, or?
Well, specifically, it was we have a pack. We have an experiment pack that we sell, and we try to sell it like rock bottom.
Yeah.
Right now,
we've got one of them.
Yeah. And what it does is it takes.
I blew up my dog with it. I'm just kidding. It's not. No, it's safer. It's much safer than that.
So I've gone through about 10,000 experiments. I really know a lot about experiments and things. And so we'll take an egg, and we can do all these wild things with an egg. But then you have to cross-wire your experiments. So you have to go, this ties to that, and that ties to that concept, that ties to that concept, that applies to this age. And they're experiments that basically cover everything from kindergarten to 8th grade. But then I was being able to interject things for biology, chem, physics, which we call BCP. And she was saying you need to make it so everything integrates into BCP. And I'm going, it can't be done. It can't be done. Because I can't have something that a kindergartner's doing and a 7th grader's doing and be something in physics is doing. And I started checking everything out. I went, oh my gosh, all I have to do is do this, this, and this, and this. Yeah. And I can tweak these things, and then I can have things that are solely for physics or solely for biology or that. But anyway, so the point is, I saw I could do it. But to do it, I had to have access to everything I'd ever known about science.
You mentioned this earlier, and when you get some new information about your God and your King and His creation, it makes you love Him more and just settles you down a little bit. It calms me, it relaxes me. Even sometimes at nighttime, I'm looking up at the stars, or I see the moon, or take my binoculars, and I'm like, man, you know who I am. You're aware of me on this little speck of a planet, you know. And the other day I heard a story that I hadn't heard in a long time, or had ever heard. It was of a dolphin. And they said, think about dolphins and some of the other sonar creatures that we have in the ocean. And for them to evolve just in that particular area, they would have to have 3 different functioning systems evolving at the same time. One being a vocal ability to be able to do that. One being a special hearing device to receive it. And then one being a mental device to transmit the receptions into sonar images. And to think that those 3 different systems accidentally happen is absurd.
Yeah.
There's no way, and I never really thought about that. And there's tons of, various creation science, things that I find that's constantly testifying of God. And when I hear that, even about the mind and what it's capable of doing, it just makes me, like you said, love him more. Just it calms my.
Let me give you one example, because this will help for what I want to tell you in a minute. I'm a little bit fuzzy on exactly the way the echolocation works on a dolphin, but I'm up on the bat right now. I mean, I've got the things. I'm just not sure. Either the bat or the dolphin actually sends out different frequencies at the same time, so the sonar is coming out at 2 different frequencies, and it helps them to make a 3-dimensional image of what they're doing. I think it's the dolphin.
Yeah, it's just an accident that happened from an explosion.
Watch this.
Right.
But watch this. This is a goal concept. This is important for the rest of the story. So a goal concept is something that's just fascinating. It's just kind of like rocker socks. It's cool. And it's good for biochem physics and the younger ones. You can even start little kindergartners beginning to understand. I don't believe in baby science. It's got to be great stuff, but said in a way that as kindergartner or whatever, you got to begin wiring them when they're young to get the maximum impact. So there's a we were driving down in Texas, and we turned down this road to visit some of Renita's old friends. And I noticed the sign said Bat Cave Road, and I just started laughing because I used to watch Batman when I was a kid. I thought of the Batmobile, coming out with the fire, behind the car and all. And she and then she said, no, there's a Bat Cave down this road. There's a cave that has bats in it. And I went, oh, really? So then I talked to them, to our 2 friends when we pulled up at their house, and said, yeah, it's Bracken Cave. I said, Bracken Cave, the Bracken Cave? And I went, whoa, that's the biggest bat colony in the world. 20 million, I knew about it, but I forgot it was in San Antonio. 20 million bats come to this cave in San Antonio. It's on the outskirts of San Antonio, and they nest, and that's where they rear their young. And then they said, you want to have a tour of them coming out of the bat cave? I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So the fellow took us there. The fellow took us there, and you're walking by this dilapidated building, and it's got a hole going down like 180 feet. He goes, don't go into that building. It's got a long drop, and that's how they used to. Because they were gathering the nitrates and all for explosives in World War.
Saltpeter.
What was it? Was it
Civil War and
but they actually set up guards around it to keep the South or North
Bad
from getting
poo
at
makes saltpeter, which makes gunpowder.
So anyways, this is a fascinating thing. And then we sat down, and the guy's he's telling us they're about to start coming out. And he goes, 20 million bats, and I already knew about it. And then he said, there's a moat. They're beginning to. He said, go around in circles, and he said it's because they can't fly straight up. And I went, well, that's not true. They can fly straight up really well. And actually, because one of the things that I said, how in the world to get 20 million bats to go out of a cave without crashing into each other? It's going to be absolute pandemonium. And I don't know, but my hunch is they're going around in circles, and they're establishing the size of the line. And then they just keep going around like this as they're coming out. It makes sense. It's a way to get them to organizedly come out. Right. And they come out, and they just keep going in this big circle.
Yeah.
And they're right over your head, like 7 feet above your head. There's this massive thousands and thousands and thousands of bats, and they're circling around you. It's absolutely insane. And then they start going out. It's an amazing choreographed thing. And they say, if I've got it right, that's why I need my files. I think it makes a line 20 miles long of bats, and they just keep piling out, and they eat some, I don't know, like 500,000
tons of
I mean, like
mosquitoes
a lot,
and stuff.
a
Yes,
lot-
we
a lot
like
of
bats.
mosquitoes.
Yeah, we need bats.
So the thing,
And ducks.
ever since I first learned about it many years ago, I said, how in the world do they keep from crashing into each other? Because we can't hear their sound, but their
right.
sound is loud. It's so loud they have to detach their ears every time they do it. And when bats are going out to pursue something, when they're just cruising around, they're shooting out 10 or so impulses a second. It's not the squeaking that you hear. It's you can't hear it. And then when they go into pursuit, it goes up to 200 times per second. So they have to detach as they scream, or they'll blow their own eardrums, and then they have to re-engage it in 200ths of a second to catch them coming back. And this has to go like that at precision time. Now, but I knew that was an interesting fact for me. But what I really didn't understand is, if I'm screaming and you're screaming and everyone else is screaming, how in the world can I tell which vibrations are mine?
Yeah.
So I figured out they have to have just thinking,
Yeah.
just think, they have to have a signature vibration. And so somehow they have to have a way of telling whose
Theirs from
signature
somebody
vibration.
else's,
Yeah, even though everybody's screaming at you at the same time.
20 million.
Then I found out, I found out the reason I didn't know the answer is because no one on earth knew the answer.
Wow.
And then when I found out the answer is that if they vibrate over 100,000 times a second. So if your vibration rate is 100,001
Yeah.
vibration a second, and mine is 100,001 and 1/10
Right.
of a second. No, get this. 100,000 vibrations a second. If mine is 1/10 of a vibration different than yours, I can discriminate that in 3 millionths of a second. God has made it to where they can do that, and they can.
It's like FM radio times a billion.
Yeah,
You can dial in
it's
your
absolutely insane.
Your frequency is a little bit different than
Yeah,
theirs.
and I'm going, how in the world did God pull that
Wow,
off?
it's
And
incredible.
I'm pretty sure they can change course in a 10,000th of a second, because if you're flying and you both change course the same direction, you have to re-change course before you collide. And there's not dead bats all over the bottom of caves, and you're dealing with 20 million bats all screaming at each other.
In a small space.
Yeah. So that's a gold concept. And there's all kinds of things I can tie into that make it just magnificent. And it'll put any physician on their face before God. It'll put any physicist who doesn't know that going, when I got my master's degree and I was giving my thesis talk, half of the class came up to me afterward and said, all I did was tell them gold concepts. All I did was tell them amazing things. I didn't mention God or anything. Half of them came up to me privately in the course of the next day or so and said, I don't believe in God, but after what you told me, there has to be something up there.
Right.
And I found that when people understand the wonders of their dog or the wonders of their eye, there's a softness there.
Yeah.
People have a lot of hurt inside their hearts regarding Christians, and we're all just people struggling to make life, and we misinterpret things. But when you start bringing up wonders, there's an amazing softness. And what I can say is, I'll talk to an atheist and I'll say, well, let me just throw some stuff at you. And then they just they soften.
Yeah.
And I say, I believe there's a God who made all this. If I'm right, there's hope for us after we die.
Yeah.
If you're right, there's no hope.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how soft people are.
Yeah.
And-
I'm so glad you said that. Last year we discovered this after a lot of study and some things that we did on our travels. There's a lack of awe. There's something that a sense of awe does for humans. That is standing at the Grand Canyon. That is going out and looking at the moon, looking at the stars, going to Big Bend in Texas, and just looking at things. And when you lack awe, there's a problem in your psyche, in your moral development, and just about everything that you do. It begins to shut down portions of your brain and your thought process. Awe is a missing out, which is why people are stuck on their phones, stuck inside the house. They are lacking all moments. I think one of the best things that you can give your family is take them to the Smoky Mountains. Take them to outside. Let them look at the stars. And take them to see. We drove. How many hours away did we drive to see the last solar eclipse, so we could actually take our glasses off, and we saw things. We saw this magnetic field waving on the grass. It looked like I was inside of an ocean. We're saw the solar flare on the bottom side. It was bright. It was just crazy things that we saw. All the birds and everything just got quiet. It was a moment of awe.
Wow. Wow.
We need all moments in our life like that.
Right, well, they say that what you see is based on what you know, and I've seen that. That's why I'm so pumped about CrossWired Science, is because there's something I have to tell you about it that will help make a lot of sense. Is that if you start putting, Einstein said either to some everything's a miracle, to some nothing is a miracle, and I just see everyone doesn't think anything's a miracle. They don't realize what's actually going on, and so one of my big things is helping people to understand, and so but you see according to what you know. So if I explain to you a bunch of things about bats, it'll change how you ever see bats for the rest of your life, and you just go, oh my goodness, and you'll have those moments of awe in just common things. You might see your dog doing something, you go, oh my gosh. And so it's a big deal. So this is what I wanted to explain to you. This is so cool. So I went when I was 24. I went up on a mountain, and I always had a book, a devotional called My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, and I had my Bible. And when I do my devotion times, I would only take those two things with me. I was kind of a radical, and I'd spend this time with the Lord. And I picked up from a garage sale, I picked up a book on memory. And the book on memory, I just put it in my back pocket, didn't think anything of it. And I never read anything but those two books. And as I went up on the mountain, I felt like I was supposed to read this book on memory. So I started going through this book on memory, and my dad was a superintendent. My mom was a teacher. I wanted nothing to do with education. But as I was reading, I was going, no, he's actually wrong there. What he's saying is incorrect. It's just flat out incorrect. And then he'd go, well, that applies to you because you have this kind of memory, but that doesn't apply to everybody else. And I started critiquing this book, and I was writing down my notes, but I didn't want to critique the book. I was just doing it, and I always write down thoughts I have. I came off the mountain. I said, I think God has just explained to me how the human mind works. And I said, I don't want to know how the human mind works, but I think I've just been explained how it works. And then all kinds of things happened. And this fellow comes up to me and he says, God has called you to have a tremendous impact on the children of the world. And I went, what was that? I didn't even like children. No, I didn't want that. I didn't want anything to do with children.
Now, how many children did you end up having?
8.
8,
yeah.
I had 9.
Yeah.
So now you've been blessed with God is
16
total.
It's crazy, and I love it. I mean, sometimes the eggs drive me crazy.
Yeah,
but
we'll have to have you over again to just talk about that incredible portion of your testimony.
So I didn't want that, and then I start my whole thing. I want to explain to people what I'm learning about science, because science is validating everything about everything, but I tried to get parents involved, and nobody had any time. And I anyway, and so I want to stay on target because I'm trying to tell you one specific thing. So what happened was I ended up walking up a valley, and in the valley I have no idea what happened. All I know is I knew that I knew. God said, make it so children can understand it. And I fought and I fought and I fought, and I said, they can't understand it. 3 weeks later, our teachers on our town went on strike, and I didn't like the teachers in our town, and I decided to take a class. They gave me a 7th grade class, and I went, well, second grade class. And I said, well, I'm going to see if kids can understand this. And I started pounding them. I knew somewhat how to teach because I worked with teenagers, and I started just pounding them with all this stuff made to where they could understand it, and they were right with me. And then I got called in to the principal the next week, and he said, what's going on in your classroom? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm getting calls from the parents. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, they say their kids are saying things that sound amazing, but they don't know what they're talking about. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just teaching them about science. And they were understanding what I was saying, but the parents didn't understand it because they didn't know their science. But the kids understood it. And they had the papers come in and everything. And I finished that course. I can't remember what happened after that. But I went, they can understand.
They can, yes,
they can understand. All this I've been taught in my education, because I had a master's degree, and it was wrong, and I was working on a doctorate. This whole thing about abstract and concrete thinking is completely wrong. I'm completely abstracting these kids to the max, and they are right there with me. And I went, if you teach it right, they can understand some pretty deep stuff that their parents struggle with. Yeah. And so I started experimenting with it, and it worked unbelievably. I had an adopted son, and he was struggling in school, and I was just beginning to get involved with everything. And I said, well, I wonder if I can teach him by what I learned on the mountain, and if I wonder if it'll work. And so I didn't pay any attention what the school was doing. He was going to flunk second grade, and I didn't pay any attention to it. I started just having fun with him, doing what I learned on the mountain, which is actually very fun to do. And every day I'd spend a little bit of time with it, and we worked on it. And then they called me into the office 9 months later, or 6 months later, and they said, your son, we retested him. He's borderline genius. And they said, it's emotional. He said, we want to admit him into our GATE program. And also his younger brother. And I went, I walked out of that room and I was going, what happened? What happened? And then I went, oh my gosh, my younger son was listening to what I was teaching my older son.
Wow. Wow.
And I wired them this way that I learned on the mountain. There's a TED Talk on our website. I can talk about it, and I talk about using it with kids that are in continuation school, and they
the thing that you learned on the mountain you can find on your website. Okay.
Yeah. But it's like I was teaching.
That's the
I was teaching these people.
CrossWiredScience.com.
Yeah. I started teaching kids. I was in a public school classroom, substitute teaching, anyway. And the administrators knew who I was. And then one kid tried to kill another kid and stabbed him repeatedly right in front of the teacher's desk and almost killed him. Police came in, paramedics came in, saved his life, and the teacher walked out, said, I'm done, and just left. That's it. He just left. And so the principal asked me if I would take the job. And I took it. And they had these continuation school kids that I came to really, really love. I was with them for a year. And they gave me these little workbooks. And they weren't learning a thing. They weren't learning a thing. And I started teaching the same way that I learned, from the pattern I learned on the mountain. And they were right with me. And they were so excited about what was happening. And this little lady next to me, she came in and she says, you can't teach them this way. And they say they can't learn that way. I said, but they can. They're smarter than I am. Right. Their memory is better than mine. And eventually I got fired from the job because I wouldn't conform. But the principal came into me and he talked to me and he said, you cannot teach them this way. They cannot learn this way. And I said, they're learning. You saw them. They're learning. And he said, well, I did notice they were watching every move you made. They were watching. I said, that's because they understand what I'm saying. You may not, but they do, because I've already pre-wired them. And so they understand what I'm saying. You don't, they do. And Sal was one guy that was so dear to me. He was the leading gang member in the town I was teaching. And he was so excited about nature, because I was teaching him about how nature worked, how he worked, and everything else. And this one memorable moment I talk about in the TED Talk. And he gave it to me, this little teeny flower. And he goes, Mr. Miller, look at this little flower. And he was so excited about it. And it's like their eyes were open to see more than sex, drugs, and alcohol. Right. And they were learning that they could learn. Yeah. But the system the public school was putting them under. Yeah. And see, there's something called mind fly when people start to really think deeply and they'll come up with these questions. Most of the public school teachers, because they're not taught, can't even discern what's going on. Yeah. But their mind is going through webs in their mind, and they're coming up with profound questions or observations.
Or even beyond that, there's some really good teachers in the public school system. They said, well, you've got to stick to this test that we're going to base your salary and your payment and everything else on this. And so I'm sorry, Sally or Billy, you can't ask that question because we got to get back to this thing. I'm not allowed to teach
teachers
anymore.
That understand are completely crippled by the testing.
I can't teach thought. I can't teach. I remember one of my professors. It was brilliant. He said, intelligence is marked by an ability to get your information. Not that you already have it, but we can't teach how to find information. How to
Well, it's more than that. Pre-wiring is massive because you see based on what you know. There's as I was working on this organizational system, you'll see how all this fits together. Okay, I've told you what you need to know to hear this very important thing, and so I've spent all this time organizing this stuff, and it's working unbelievably for what I need to do. Okay, and then Renita goes, here's a neat book by John Maxwell, and she said I guess he's supposed to be pretty good with teaching leadership and things like that and communication. I went, well, let me read. So we started reading it because we have like 20 books we're reading together, and we always take time to read, and we read a page here and a page there and a page there. And the eggs think this one's stupid, but actually it's really smart. But anyway, so it's very fun. And so one of the things he said was on his book on communication, which is really good. He said it's really hard to simplify. It takes a lot of time to learn how to simplify something. And he said it takes a lot of hard work, and I don't want to always do it, but it takes a lot of time to learn how to do it. And or to learn how to make a talk simple.
Right.
Steve Jobs said that simplicity is not simplicity. Simple is really hard to get at. Simplicity is just someone ignorant saying something and giving us.
Take a hard concept, make it simple.
Yeah. So
Simplify.
So he said. So Steve Jobs says, once you've arrived at simple, you can take the world.
Wow.
Simplicity is when you don't really understand what the issues are.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. So simple. So I'm working on a talk for this conference I just came to, and this is everything. So I'm working on this talk, and I'm going. What I learned on the mountain was how your brain is wired. It involves mind fly and pre-wiring and wrong wiring and all this concept wiring and all these kind of things. And I said, I can't merge it with this undefinable thing that I know is out there, and I kind of know what it is, but there's something I can't put it together. And a leading producer asked me what I learned on the mountain. I handed him some sheets, and he said, how did you learn this? And I said, if it's good, it was God, because I was not even thinking of this. I said, but I can't share that because it's missing something, and I didn't know what it was. And so I'm working on this talk, and John Maxwell, his words are echoing in my mind. You've got to work hard at it. So I'd already worked 20 hours, which is what I normally work on a talk, and I went, okay, I'm going to put more time into this thing. And I fight through it. In 40 hours, I realized most of what I just did is a waste of time. So I kept working on it. I was up to 50 hours. And because of what John Maxwell said, I was going, Lord, are you guiding me in this? Are you guiding me? Am I supposed to keep going? I have other things I need to do. And I've already spent 50 hours. That's more than a week solid on a talk, a 45-minute talk. And I felt like I should keep going. And I should keep going. It went up to over 100 hours on a 45-minute talk. And then all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh. What I've been trying to find for 40 years, I see it. And I never saw it. I've merged the brain with what was missing. I know how to wire a brain, but I didn't know what the missing thing was. And the missing thing was beauty. And suddenly I understood it, because I've known you have to keep the top spinning. If a child's top is not spinning, which is what happens with the majority of textbooks, just throw the thing away and go out and toast marshmallows and have s'mores, because it will all fall. But what came to me during that 100 hours was something I've been trying to find expression for, and it dovetailed, it connected brain and beauty in a way I never saw. When you take an AP physics class or an AP biology class or whatever, you're basically doing a lot of what I call single wiring. Now, the exaflop was very important for me to understand, because I've said for a long time, it's not like you can think 3 times or 5 times faster than someone's speaking. You can think 1,000 times faster than someone's speaking.
Right.
And I knew that based on what I understood about wiring.
Right.
But I couldn't, once I understood that number, I'm going, I'm right. I am right. You can think way faster than what people are saying. And so where was I going with that? So
You're wiring beauty and
okay. So what happens when you're doing a lot of memorizing where you don't really understand things, or you're trying to dissect, what the heck does this paragraph even mean in this textbook? You're just single wiring it, and then you force yourself to keep wiring that single wiring, and you're making the wire just for the sake of
When I was in my physics class, and all of a sudden calculus came in, and not that I'd hated calculus, but it was just this advanced math. But all of a sudden now, I was putting in with physics, and I wired the two of them together. Those classes exploded, and I actually wanted to do them more because I wired them together.
That's a rare thing, and it's important to understand that's a rare thing for most kids. Most kids are just building single wires, and they have a whole big bundle of them.
Single wires.
And then all they do is they just fall. So Debbie was an example I give in the talk. Is she got her A+ in her AP chemistry. After 9 months, 3/4 of it was completely gone. It completely fell, because I knew how to test her on it just verbally. And then after a year, you're at 90%. After 2 years, 95%. And at the convention hall, there was thousands and thousands of people. And I can tell you, every single one of those parents doesn't know anything about science. It's like flatline. Nothing. And I talk to people and I go, how much? And they go, nothing. I know nothing. I said, you had 10 years at least of science in American schools and you know nothing, and that's the facts. It's because it's all based on single wiring and it all falls.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where it gets wild. Okay, if you take a gold concept like I told you about the bat, you're basically and I did this. We did this little video, and it shows. Have you ever taken steel wool and burn it? It's like you put it on a like a hanger, a steel
No,
hanger.
I've not,
and you
but I
spread
want
out-
to now.
you
I
have
can't
to-
tell you how bad I want to do
extra fine, and you spread it out and you light it down here. You can light it with a 9-volt battery. It'll start going up, and literally you have it. When what started is like 5 wires that are red hot. You now have thousands of them, and they're all going at the same time. It's a perfect example of what's going on when you
Yeah, when everything's firing.
like I told you one time about the bat. I could come back here in 10 years and I could say, what did I talk to you about? Give me some details, and you would still remember it. That's from one time, because I wired a web.
Yeah.
You have to, in education, you have to use the power of the web.
Right.
The web, not the web,
Yeah.
but the webs.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you have this concept web over here with the bats.
Yeah.
And then you can tie it over here with the dolphins, and then you
Yeah.
can tie it
I
over
do.
here with how we're
And that, we didn't plan on saying that. I had no idea you were going to talk about the bats. That was the Holy Spirit just. I mean, I just popped out the word about the dolphins. I don't know why He made me remember that, but it's a total.
Yeah. So what happens is that if I taught you some things about how sound works and everything, and then later on, now this is really important to understand. Imagine if I built over a course of an hour all this web wiring about sound, things that you don't know about right now. And then a little while later, you're say messing with some of your equipment, and suddenly something happens, and you go, "Oh, I understand.
Right, well,
I understand. I
right,
understand
right.
what happened." And then what would happen is your brain would actually go through the existing wiring that I'd already taught you. And so what happens is one memory or one word can cause a rewiring
Right.
of 1,000,000
Wow.
wires.
I get it. Yeah.
Do you get it?
Very exciting.
So if I give you a good web, don't you see?
They're
if
tied,
people
yeah.
are forgetting 10 years of science, and I can tell you something in 5 minutes, and you remember it for 10 years,
Well,
don't
sometime, right,
don't
this
you
morning.
realize what we could do with a child's brain?
And why is it that we were talking? My wife and I were talking about. I loved word problems when I grew up. The bulk of students do not like word problems. Can't do word problems because it's not a string. A word problem. Well, you're talking
It
about
involves
apples
webs.
now.
It
I don't know
involves
what to do.
webs.
I mean, how does apple have to do with math?
Yeah.
And it really they don't like them. They
Well,
don't
it's
like
because
them.
they don't have the web wiring.
Yes,
They have
yes,
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
tons of sense.
The lesson I wanted to, the lesson that I learned
Yeah.
through all this was the beauty, though. I wanted to tie in beauty because it's so important for people that are teaching their own kids. One thing is a lot of people farm their kids out to other institutions. I don't think that's a good idea, because if you know what your children are learning in the web wiring and it's
Right.
exciting, you become their long-term memory and you share in these things in life together. But also, what's happening in homeschooling specifically is there's a lot of high dollar things happening, and there's lots of money, and a lot of people are saying this is the way to go. And it sounds like in science they're using all these big words, and I'm going, those big words are damaging the whole thing. You need to be extremely selective on the vocabulary, or they're just going to have to one wire everything. And you got to make it anyway. You got to really carefully choose your vocabulary words. But anyway, this is what's so fantastic. This is what can change everything. You're going to Texas pretty soon to have some fun, right? You're going to go do this music
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you guys
yeah.
love making
Yeah.
music.
Rock and roll.
Well, what's happening to a lot of people is they get trapped in these. It could be a good meaning co-op, or a good meaning particular methodology, or a well-meaning friend, or a charter school, or a lot of big thing in California is I'm going to get some dual credit class. And I'm going, don't do that. Don't do that. In science, what happened was I had 2 friends, Jim and John, and they were my prize subjects when I was beginning to learn about all this, and they were learning their science so well, and their moms were great homeschool moms, leaders, in fact. And now they're very accomplished. One's a nuclear physicist, and the other one's a doctor with all these titles, and they're both very kind atheists because they learned things in their grad programs and stuff that broke apart the weak understanding of science that they had as far as creation science. I'm saying I would never send a kid into upper level sciences without 200 hours of creation science that's well wired, so they can handle anything. And because we absolutely trounce evolution, we absolutely trounce long ages. It doesn't have but people don't understand how powerful the evidences are. But I say that because like throwing away the high school years, those are the most precious years. You can go out and see the world together. You know, you can do all these incredible things and sharing these experiences.
Would you link that beauty with awe, like we talked about before?
Well, yes, but even more than that. It's like we tell people, if a curriculum, if a textbook, if anything isn't saying, throw this away if it's not working for you. Don't even do this. You only have to do half of it. You know, God wants you to be the commando of your own home. I can't be I've written a lot of curriculum, but I can't be your commando. God wants to speak to every single person. David Green from Hobby Lobby, he got off the path, and they started making these little frames, and that's because that's what they felt God was leading them to do. And the kids would get 8 cents to put these little picture frames together, and then they started little stores selling picture frames, and God just blew the whole thing up. And now they're the family's given more to Christian causes than any family in human history, because they got off the path that everyone else was following, and they found God's trail for them. Hence, find your trail.
Right. So I feel that parents are the best parent-teacher conferences that you could ever have. If they're homeschooled, we know exactly what each of the children is doing. Exactly. And it's easy to select their math, their curriculum, and all the other things.
Wait, I've got to tell you one more thing.
Please do.
This last thing.
Now, if I get in trouble from your wife, I'm just blaming you.
Okay.
You need to know that.
last thing. This is so important, is that the top has to keep spinning.
Yeah.
So with us, with CrossWired Science, we're trying to, it's a process. We're coming back and we're fixing up all kinds. It's a lot of hours to keep the top spinning. But one of the things that keeps the top spinning, and Renita is the embodiment of this, and I know April is too, is she's so stinking delightful.
Yeah.
She's so delightful. So she comes into her class teaching geography. She goes, we're all going to make food for every country we're studying. And so we sit down to this amazing, when the kids have had the fun of, and they're so proud of their meals from Turkey, and there's one from Istanbul, whatever. And it's so fun. She makes everything a complete delight. So she keeps the top spinning by delight, by beauty, and it's her expression and her fun. And Todd Wilson, Todd Wilson and Debbie Wilson, the family man, and she goes, a little learning and a little bit of laughter makes an awesome lesson. And it really does. It does. It's like I'm like an academic. And it's like, for me it was, let's get down to the real stuff. Let's pound this stuff in. Right. And then God saying, no, you have to keep the beauty there.
Yeah, that's good.
The beauty
stuff.
there.
Really
so what's happening is you're embodying it, because you're saying, forget school, we're going to Texas.
Yeah.
And what it does is it gives kids a wholeness and a happiness that when they finally sit down and do things, they're ready, and they've got all these other things. Last example, Teddy Roosevelt's dad took him, this is amazing, took him on long field trips. Like a year long, they went down the Nile, spending months, and he started the Roosevelt Family Zoo, which consisted of stuffed animals that he captured. And because of that, later on he was an outdoorsman, eventually became president. John Muir, this is so cool. John Muir goes, will you please spend 3 days with me? 3 days. And so Teddy Roosevelt left when he was a president, and he went with John Muir, and we actually stood by his carriage at the Wawono Hotel. Ringa says we actually slept in their beds, but anyway, and then they went into Yosemite Valley, and he said, this is what's happening in Yosemite Valley. And Roosevelt saw it, and he ended up setting aside millions of acres, the largest conservationist of all time. And it all goes back, the Yosemite Valley, when you're seeing all the waterfalls, it's all because of Teddy Roosevelt, and it's all because of Teddy Roosevelt's dad, who took him down and made him into an outdoors boy.
Yes.
Wow, what an impact. So the whole thing is, beauty is far more important than we realize, because it's a foundation in which we interpret everything.
You hang all your information.
So mom and dad's hikes, and dad's, let's go camping, let's go start a studio, and let's sing together. That's just critical.
Yeah.
But it also helps them with all of life.
Yeah.
And Nancy Campbell said it well. She said, manners, but actually it's kindness is what it is. It opens more doors and opportunities for people than intellect or skills ever could. Yeah. and it's a happy life.
It is.
Doesn't it lead
It's
to a happy life?
It is true. So true.
Isn't
And
that so
I
cool?
love.
So you take the brain and you take
Yeah.
beauty and you merge them together and they fit. You see, because you
Yeah.
get to keep the top spinning.
Yeah.
That's what causes mind flying.
It's everything that the Lord does, and then you start realizing it was His kindness that brought me to repentance above all. I mean, He did everything else.
Yeah.
All the signs, wonder, all the miracles, all the salvific work, but it was His kindness. Look, I have loved it having you here. I want to have you back. I don't know how you can get back up to Tennessee. I mean, we have an airport here, so fly back. I know I'll see you next spring or whatever for the Teach 'em Diligent conference. What have you got coming up too? You've got a couple more conferences in a couple different states. Or where are you headed?
Colorado and North Carolina and Texas.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we only do 5 a year.
Oh, well, you
time.
guys are going to have a great time. They can catch you again. Right now, it's crosswiredscience.com, soon to be CrossWired Education.
Yeah, and if they need a discount from this podcast, they can email in on our contact form
you heard
to,
that.
to Renita, and it's very affordable for the pack.
Okay, great deal. Did you hear that? Jett Connect podcast discount right there. and it's great stuff. We've got it. Our kids loved it. We've loved meeting you guys. It was a joy to have you. Just want to thank you for being here with us. Thank you guys for watching. We're going to have a ton more shows. I've got about 8 different ideas that you've given me just from that. It's going to be great. And I'm looking forward myself to go back and watch the talk that you did on your website.
You're going to do awesome at this.
Yeah.
You're such a blessing.
Oh man, you're just a good person. You're a kind man. I love you. All right, blessings to you guys. Yes, sir. All right. God bless you guys.
Thanks for listening to the end of this episode. You'll find resources from this podcast linked in the description below. You'll also find our social media platforms and ways to support our ministry. Be sure that you're following along so you never miss an update. Like, subscribe, and comment. We'd love to hear from you.